good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another gathering of the Fractional Forum. I'm just trying to stay warm today, y'all. I feel like this my coldness is distracting me from my facilitating capacity.
It's not even cold yet, though. The cold's coming on Sunday. Yeah.
Let's not talk about it, Lindsay.
Okay.
Also, here's the thing. I'm wearing a t-shirt because it's like part of an outfit because then I have an event later today and it's a whole thing. And like normally I would just go and put like sweater on. But there's a whole story and we can't all see my whole outfit. So we're not going to spend that much time talking about that right now because we could much better serve the people who are tuning in to watch in talking about what we promised we were going to talk about, which is how to choose a fractional resource that is aligned with your business. Now, if you have tuned in to any of the Fractional Forum episodes before, you will know that we talk a lot about purpose and why and this concept of internal alignment in a business. And so that is what we want to help roll the conversation out into from a fractional perspective today, because I don't know. My drastic voice in my head is saying one of the worst things you can do is hire a fractional resource that's not aligned with your business. There's probably worse things that you could do. But if we can help people to not do that by having a conversation about it, then this is what we're going to talk about today. And so if you are joining us live, we always love to see your face and your comments in the comments. So please type your comments into the comment box. And also specifically, if you have any questions about what it looks like to do that, what do I need to know from an alignment perspective in order to find an aligned resource? Like in this world of fractional resources, and a lot of people, actually, we were just talking about this before we went live. There's a lot of different fractional people who offer services in different ways. And so how do you know how to align with the right person, but also to align with the right quote unquote solution package so that you are actually getting what you need for your business? So ask your questions on that, especially if you've had an experience where you felt like you ended up with a not aligned fractional resource, because it's kind of a complicated industry. There's no everyone does the same thing the same way. There's zero of that. Yeah. So Keith, Tim, Lindsay, welcome to the conversation. Where do we want to start, friends?
Maybe I'll start with some color commentary here on exactly what you said, because I think that there's a lot of people that have become very good. Maybe this is an arguable point regardless, at hiring. And so they have processes for hiring people. They know how to onboard an employee. And I think the school of thought says, okay, you need to define the work you need to do to bring on those people. And I think that that leads to really well-defined roles and job descriptions, et cetera, et cetera. I think when people are looking for some of that fractional advice, it's completely foreign to them because they don't necessarily know the problem that needs to be solved. They probably just usually know kind of the general orb of it. And so they know they have a challenge in technology, or they know they have a challenge in sales or finance or operations or marketing, but they actually need the expertise to create that path versus the person or skill set to fill a specific role. And so I think just in terms of the way that people or executives approach that help, I think it's functionally different than hiring someone for the organization, which is maybe where I'll kick things off.
I think you said some really key things there, Keith, and it's defining the problem, right? We talk about that a lot in sales, about what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And so that becomes a collaborative conversation. I think I have a problem in this area, but I can't really define it. And so part of that pre-engagement with a fractional resource is defining that problem. What are we trying to solve? Okay, now that we have it defined, how are we going to go solve it? And that becomes a bit of loosely a job description, like you said, because that becomes a key part of that communication down the chain. Right? You don't want to have a fractional resource who's taken a role in the company, just show up one day and everybody's like, who's that guy? What's he doing here? I thought we were doing fine. And so you have to really be clear on that. So there's a lot of steps to take to create that alignment before day one starts.
I think the important thing that you said, Tim, was around problem discovery in a way of, I'm sure we can all agree that often you go into a situation, whether it's an engagement or even previous corporate experience, where you think you know what the problem is, but in fact, you're more like dealing with symptoms, right? I have an example of something that happened this week. So the conversation was about accountability. That was right away, like, we have an accountability issue. And it's quite a common thing to say. And so I said, okay, tell me about this accountability issue. Well, I'm not sure who is in this seat. And I said, okay, that's fine. You know, let's work through this. And I want to book a meeting. This was like an 8 a.m. conversation. I need to book a last minute meeting for 12:30 today. And I know if I send an email to this person, then they likely won't answer by then. So I'm going to actually pull in this other resource to come to the meeting. So who is actually in that seat? And I was like, okay, let me think a little bit about that. And then came back, you know, like, thought about it. We continued speaking. It was just kind of going in the back of my mind. And I asked back, I said, okay, so is the problem that the person isn't responding back, you know, within a couple hours? So that could be an issue. Is it that the individual doesn't have the skill set to be in the meeting? Or is it the fact that we're actually booking a client meeting 4 hours before the meeting or 3 hours before the meeting? I mean, all of those could be potential, like, broader issues in the organization that even could reinforce perhaps some behavior issues. So I guess, you know, to go really deep into, it's not necessarily as easy as, like, it's a sales issue, it's a tech issue, operations. Perhaps it's just, like Tim said, getting into the conversation with an individual that you are seeing is doing great work out there, right? Like, they're talking about the things that excite you when you research into them or speak to, you know, your peers, your other fellow industry colleagues. That name is being thrown around, and it's just starting the conversation, I think, is the biggest thing.
So you brought up oh, go ahead, Tracy.
No, go ahead, Keith.
I might be taking this in a little bit of a different direction, but I think that you brought up an interesting point, Lindsay, in terms of even some of those conversations and excitement. And you talked about industry as something that, you know, maybe being an important selection criteria for a fractional person. How important do you think that industry knowledge or industry specific knowledge is? And do you think it's an advantage or like a feature or a bug when you're selecting the right fractional person? And we have Tim back, who I think is having
lots of
power
power
issues today. I think this
The power went out in the valley. Oh, he did lose his power.
No, yeah,
it's moved, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, the power is gone, but you're back. You're on you have a generator? Is that kind of how you're?
No, I'm using my Wi-Fi hotspot on the phone, so we'll see how
Well,
long battery lasts on everything here.
You recovered quickly on that, Mr. Duffy. Keith, to answer your question, I don't think it will hurt, but I think what happens is individuals get so stuck on that. But I would challenge back that perhaps, like, a diverse perspective of someone with an industry that is kind of parallel or supplementary, or maybe not supplementary, but on the periphery. I don't know what I would call that, but a thing maybe to look for is someone who has experienced what you've experienced. Like, if you're trying to realize more profit, if you're trying to scale, if you are trying to grow your workforce, like that kind of, if you're looking to transform your business, or those things, maybe experience in doing those things versus I have experience in engineering businesses. So
I think what you're saying makes sense. Like, even if I look at, like, the last year of, like, the work that we've done, you know, for Delivered, we've worked with insurance, we've worked with design firms. Like, there's no specific industry that I think we gravitate towards, but I agree with you where if you've gone through some of those patterns, having the ability to have the person you're talking to articulate where they've been through that challenge, how they've come out the other side, and then maybe even having that experience in different industries adds more tools to the tool belt to be able to solve some of those challenges in unique or competitive ways. I'm just thinking aloud there.
I think this is really interesting to me because, I mean, we're in Calgary. There's lots of oil and gas, right? And so, like, I remember having a conversation with an oil and gas adjacent tech company who was looking for a marketing consultant that had experience in oil and gas. And I was like, well, that's fine. It's not right or wrong, right? But it's also like, what kind of experience in oil and gas? Because if someone has worked for a well-known brand that's not tech related for 20 years and they have that experience, is that valuable to your organization? Or what about that is valuable to the organization? And even in that, I think that is one of the demonstrated benefits of a fractional person is that what are you trying to do with that? I'm not saying that it's right or wrong strategy. What are you hoping to accomplish with that? Because like somebody with tech experience, but no oil and gas experience might be more helpful to a tech company. And so it's just, I also think that there's if bring it back to alignment, this like opportunity for the brand, like for you, whoever's listening, as a brand to say, I think it's more helpful for me based on what I'm trying to do to have somebody who has this experience. And I want them to be able to go like deep. I want them to be able to prove that they've been able to do XYZ. Or I've been trying to do XYZ. Doesn't really feel right for me. So maybe I want somebody who has this more diverse experience because I want to do something different or I want to stand out from the crowd. I don't want to follow someone else's path. And that's very much based in the identity of the founder. And they're not, it's not right or wrong. I don't want anyone to think that like one way is good and one way is bad. It's just about being honest with ourselves from a business perspective to be like, this is who we are as a business. And I want to align myself with resources that match who I am and what I need. Because I also think there's a lot of people who fall into the category of fractional, who are like very one-dimensional service providers. And I will say this specifically from a marketing perspective, right? There's a lot of people who will be like, I'm very good at email marketing. That's great. It's not bad. Email marketing can be helpful for an organization. Email marketing can also not be helpful for an organization. And so from a one-dimensional perspective, unless you have that other like overarching understanding of why we might want to do that one specific thing, then bringing in someone who can just do that one specific thing might actually end up pushing you into a roadblock that doesn't solve your problem. And so I feel like I've opened a bunch of cans of worms in that scenario, but things that were coming up for me.
So before we move off that topic, do you think that the type of fractional work has a relation to that kind of broad industry expertise or we'll call it like creativity side of things? Because like if we think about marketing, I think you probably want to stand out, I would imagine, right? Like I think that a unique voice is important versus I won't pick on like operations or finance, but I think that like
but it's very dependent on, again, I would bring it back to dependent on the industry, right? So if you are in banking, you are in insurance, there are a lot of people who are buying those services who want it to feel trustworthy, who want it to feel established, who want it to feel XYZ, even if it is brand new and using new technology, right? So, and you as a founder, like, why did you get into that line of business? Did you get into insurance because you've been in insurance for 20 years and you're really passionate about the industry and you feel like you identify with that? Or are you trying to break boundaries? If you're someone who's created something because you're trying to break boundaries, then yeah, you probably want a fractional person who has more experience breaking boundaries than they have in like a specific industry. But again, I would say it's just like very individually.
I want to chime in on that too, because it is very individual and it's super dependent on the company and really all of the pieces that are a part of the company. So if a company has been trying to transform or onboard a new software for a period of time, and they're trying and they're trying and they're trying, and it's not working, they may be looking to bring in someone who has that experience. So to kind of, echo what you said, Tracy, but something that popped in my head was often a company that is beaten up and they've tried a lot of things, they need some quick wins. So like for myself specifically, being a project manager, I can go into a project-based a company that works with a project-based workflow and find wins very, very quick. So what does that do? That helps me build some trust with the team. So let's assume that I've had a lot of great conversation with the CEO, the other executives, but I still have to build trust with the team. So some of those wins, it helps me build trust with them, but it also helps the team and all the individuals involved build some confidence and some momentum, right? So when you have your whirlwind of all the things you're doing, and there's lots of stats around this, like you have 80% of your day to day is pretty much consumed. Do you want to do anything different or like add on, especially in operations? It's like maximum 20%. You can't totally change everything in a moment. And it also takes some time to like metabolize the change, right? So for me, like that's the only other thing I would think. You really have to think about the situation you're in, the timing, all that being said. And it like someone who has that very specific experience, whether it's like tactical, like industry experience, or the way your company is set up to serve others, or the exact thing you're trying to do, Tracy, like, what did you say? Like bringing a leading edge brand or doing something cutting edge. Well, then look for someone who's done that before, I guess, is the key. Not necessarily, someone who's in banking.
Not that banking can't be cutting edge.
Yes.
Could be.
I think the key thing that I keep thinking about going through everything that the three of you just said was alignment doesn't mean the same. If you wanted the same, you wouldn't be making all the changes that Lindsay's talking about. Mm-hmm. So alignment means there's some things that are similar so that they can be part of the team, but they're bringing something different to the party. And so whether that's experience in the same industry, but a different bend with a different brand or a different objective, or a different industry with some similarities to what you're doing, you need some things that are similar, but you need some things that are different too. And so you got to be looking for those. And if you just surround yourself with like-minded people, you're going to get the same results you got before. So you need to bring in something different along with that alignment.
I was going to wait to actually like devil's advocate that and say, you do not want to bring in a person who's just going to say, yes, right? Like that's the other thing. So alignment is like a spectrum, and there's a lot of different definitions to it.
Well, and I think there's also like a mindset component here, which is why I like to call myself an advisor instead of just like a CMO. I don't like fractional CMO. It's just doesn't resonate with me, because when somebody, and so my dad has been consultant for, I don't know, 40 years. So pretty much as long as I've been alive. And like, he has done a lot of projects where people don't take his advice. Right? And I think a lot of this is because of the mindset component. So it like originates with alignment, because I know that Lindsay knows this about me, but I have a very in-depth discovery process that I go through with a client before I accept a client. One of the things my clients have to demonstrate to me is that I can tell them they're wrong and they can think about it. Because if my job here is to identify gaps and create improvement opportunities and do these types of things, it doesn't work if I'm just going to come into a scenario where you're so convinced that what you're doing is right already, right? Like that there's no point in hiring me. Maybe he's hiring another fractional resource, but not Tracy Borson. And so like in my discovery process, I go through that. I make sure I believe that I can say what's real to you and you can at least consider it. If you can't stop and slow and like we can't do that together, then we're not going to progress in the areas in which I have been hired to progress these organizations. And so again, that is a very different need than what everyone might have in looking for a fractional resource. So actually, I would love to talk about this because we got a bunch of fractional people here today. Like how much responsibility falls on the fractional resource to stand up for those types of things and take care of clients in that way. And how much of it is the client's responsibility to allow the fractional resource to do what you brought them here to do? Thoughts?
Well, that's a great question.
Oh, I'll let you go first, Tim. You have a power window.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I don't know how long I'll be here today. Tracy, I think you said a couple things in there about that alignment on the fractional resource too, right? Does this company fit with me too? And I was thinking about numbers there, like, is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? I can't figure it out because there is a lot of responsibility on both. And the fractional person is going to come in and they have to demonstrate that they're going to add value and feel that they can. And they have responsibility to say is or isn't working. And that's a huge part of this, as well as the leader on the other side has to be willing to bring in different ideas. If they're just going to continue to run the show, then you're not really getting the most value out of the fractional resource. So I was thinking it was almost 60-60, like they both have more than half of the responsibility.
60-60? We're obviously missing our finance person today. Is that how you report your sales? Is that how you report your sales numbers, Tim?
Absolutely. Yeah. 120%. Yeah.
But it's an interesting perspective because like if we both take more than 50% of the responsibility, then I think we can end up in a very good place. And instead of looking at that like 100% split, like, oh, it's 60% the fractional and 40%. Well, then like I kind of get a little bit of an out as a business owner. Like you didn't do your due diligence, so I'm safe here. But if we both have to do that, I'm with you, Tim. I'm accepting this 60-60.
You're 60-60?
Yeah. 60-60.
We have the realists on this side of the screen. What do you think about that, Keith?
The sales and marketing dreamers are on this side.
I like it.
We just break rules over here. It's fine.
No, I totally get what you're saying though, and I think that, and I don't want to defer back to the kind of it depends answer, which I feel like we arrive at a lot, but I think it depends, and I think that depending on the type of work that you need being done is also how involved you get specifically in, we'll call it, some of the operations of the day-to-day of the business. And, I think we had a discussion, I think it was a couple episodes ago, where we were even talking about the differing philosophies between us around how much you like to get involved in the business versus how much you like to advise or kind of guide the business. And I think that between all of the six of us that were on the call, there was almost a 50-50 or maybe a 60-60 split. Of what that perspective was, because and I'll use technology as an example. There's a very real way that you can get into the weeds. You can start to pull back certain layers. You can start to lead certain initiatives, and sometimes that's exactly what customers need. And sometimes they need someone to help them actually kind of weather the storm as they're going through certain transitions, or they need expertise to help them deliver on very tactical goals. And sometimes, that's the solve they need. Other times it's, when they're looking more pie in the sky, more aspirational, that same consultant or that same fractional advisor that is in the trenches with them leading the day to day might actually be the wrong person to be that aspirational leader for them. And so, I think that it really depends on what the business or the group of leaders that is bringing on that fractional help is in pursuit of, and the thing that they're trying to solve for, and kind of how involved to get.
Don't you guys find too, there's a magic in just when you're like frustrated, like you feel like things just aren't changing. You have a major breakthrough. I know, Tracy, both you and I have experienced that. We've chatted about that quite a bit lately, but it is, some of these things are behavior changes, right? Like this could be an organization that has been operating this way for quite some time, and the intricacies of all of the people and the behaviors and their values and biases. And although they've come together towards a shared objective, at the end of the day, like there is a complexity in a lot of different perspectives. Like it's also a power. It can be amazing, but you can get caught in boardrooms for days and days and days, like trying to, cultivate alignment with a group of individuals. So I guess that's one thing I can say is pretty magical. Like when you are having those conversations and you're persuading a team in the way of letting them know, like, this is what you need to do or change or transform in order to get to the next level or to make your job easier. And it could be simple, like the difference between using email for all your correspondences or using Teams or Slack or whatever it is. And I've been in conversations with teams where I can't believe we're still discussing this. And I'm thinking, wow, like, do they really want to change, right? And some of them maybe do, and some of them maybe don't. Depends on their pain, like tolerance and how it's impacting them directly. And it's our jobs as fractional advisors and resources to be constantly having those conversations and gaining an understanding, because context is continually changing and the conditions. But there is a power in that from both sides. And when you work through that and have that commitment to like forge ahead and transform, it further levels up your relationship, even working within that organization. And it's pretty magical, but it doesn't happen instantly. And so I'd say there needs to be constant conversation, consistent, maybe not constant, but also like a little bit of patience. And Tracy, you talked about a discovery phase. I call mine a discovery project, and it's really, hence the project manager. But it's kind of trying it on, right? Like it's seeing if it fits. It's kind of like a probationary thing, and just, like you're looking at alignment, but it depends. It's like there's shades of gray in that. What seems aligned immediately may not be what you need. Can the relationship continue to develop and grow in order to get the results and deliver the value you're looking for? So yeah, just that was a whole bunch of stuff that you guys can pick from.
I think what you're really speaking to a lot is about change management. You have to be aligned on that journey of going through the change, because when you look at you're going along in a performance, you want to make a change, you're actually going to dip down a little bit as people get used to the new way of working. And you want to try and minimize how deep that goes, but you have to be aligned on the fact that we're going to go through this period where we're trying to figure out the new way of working. And once we get through that, we should be well beyond where we are today. But that alignment again, and making sure that you understand that this journey we're going to go through is going to take time. It isn't going to be, we flip the switch on Tuesday and we're 100 times better than we were on Monday. It doesn't work that way.
That was super
worse on Tuesday, and then hopefully a bit better as we go through the rest of the week.
That was super powerful, Tim. Like mic drop moment at 9:31 on a Wednesday. when we have a show called How to Choose an Aligned Fractional Resource, and it's actually aligned on the journey to go through the change. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's really important because I feel like from a marketing perspective, a lot of times a marketing resource is brought in to try and create immediate change, and there's not actually very much that can be done from a marketing point of view in terms of immediate change. And a lot of times we think about these things and like, I just need to send out 1 million emails. Probably not. That's probably not what you need to do in order to solve whatever XYZ problem it is that you have. That is something we could do very quickly, but that's also probably something that's not going to serve the problem. I love that too, is this like aligning on going through the journey together. And I think that that is one of the things that came up for me when you said that, is this like relationship of like, I see things that you don't see. And so like when we go through a journey together, we see more things because we see different things. And again, it's not that like one set of what people are seeing is better or worse, but as a group, we get to see more things. And because we're seeing more things, we can make better decisions because we're seeing more things. And for me, like, I'm based in authenticity, right? I actually love when my clients tell me no, and like a resounding no, because then I can like feel their brand in it. And I'm like, yes, you are standing up for your brand. And this is awesome. This is the whole point of the entire exercise, right? No is like the win for me. And so, but there's so much when we are stuck in that zone of not knowing, that we're like, oh, maybe, like, ugh, no, this is not our goal. It's like, oh, maybe, no. What do you feel? Do you feel strongly about this? Either yay or nay. A strong feeling is a good thing. A meh feeling, meh.
Yeah.
we just got a great comment, Tracy.
Yes, from a LinkedIn mystery user.
Ooh.
Fractional freelancers, consultants. It's like online dating for business. You think you found the one, but when you realize they only specialize in big picture strategy and not execution. Excited to tune in and finally learn how to swipe right on the right fractional resource. Okay, there's also a question in there. You know what? That's fun. That we should think about that.
We should. A little add-on.
Oh man, I could put that in the like opening video. Okay. You might run with that, mystery LinkedIn user. Mystery LinkedIn user, if you'd like to share your name in another comment, then we would love to know who you are.
It's top secret. This is the biggest. It's the mystery.
Yeah, maybe they want their question to be anonymous. What's the biggest red flag to watch out for when choosing a fractional professional? Oh, it's eye care. Hi, eye care. Thanks for tuning in. Asking for a friend. What's the biggest red flag to watch out for when choosing a fractional professional? Team, thoughts?
I think one of the biggest red flags for me is one-sided conversations. Whichever side that is. If it's the business owner, the leader talking too much, if it's the fractional talking too much, this is definitely a conversation that you need to figure out the definition of the problem and how you can help each other. And if one party is dominating the conversation, there's a red flag set there somewhere. Something's not going to work out.
I might be stealing this from someone else because I think it came up earlier, but I totally agree with and support this. Someone that says yes to everything. And so if you're in that first conversation and all they do is agree with you, you know, I would consider that a giant red flag. You don't want also on the flip side someone that just says no to everything and puts up roadblocks at every turn. But I think that healthy balance of practicality, I'll call it almost, and maybe a little bit more measured in terms of what they can actually commit, I'd say usually leans towards someone that understands what they're undertaking and some of the real practical challenges that are involved with it. So you don't want people that say yes all the time or are just roadblocky.
Yeah,
it's my new.
Yeah.
What is that? An adjective? Yeah.
It's an adjective and a noun.
Yeah. One thing I would say, and this is just like for how I work, is someone looking for like a cookie cutter solution. And it's just because it's so dependent on the stage of the game, the health of the organization, the individuals on the leadership team. And but I also know other, fractionals that do come on with a very structured approach. And some companies are looking for that because, well, they're not necessarily looking for a journey. They're looking for the answer, and they maybe are a bit like leery about going on that journey. So for me, I can have the largest impact by not being cookie cutter. Yes, like I do have a structured process and a way of working. However, it's super dependent on the situation. And that, to me, if we're in that conversation and they're looking for someone to come in and, implement OKRs, and that's their thing and that's what they want, and they see that as a COO accountability, and they're looking for a COO fractional to do that, there's likely someone out there who can do that. That is not me, because that company may not need OKRs. It may be something entirely different. So yeah, just kind of wanted to say that. So it's a red flag, like for me in the conversation, but I would say again, go back to it depends, because it may not work for everyone. Like when I work on engagement with Tracy and I and Tim actually have been very fortunate to work together, collaborate on an objective. And I was speaking to Tracy at the beginning, and I was speaking to many marketing like strategists or solutions to this issue. And Tracy was the only one who wouldn't tell me what would happen after we found out what was going on. And I was, like pitching it ultimately to the CEO. And I kept saying to her, okay, I love this. This is so awesome. Like, you inspire me. And I'm really excited because you are telling me that you don't know. Like, and there was so much power in that. And I was like, sign me up, teach me, you're my, Obi-Wan and all that stuff. And funny as it was, when I went back and spoke to the CEO, it was actually that pushed that CEO into making that decision. And here I had, based on my previous experience, it was a bit more of a, what does the next stage look like? What is it going to be? What am I going to get? Like, what is the end? The end is bliss and all that stuff. However, you don't know exactly what it's going to be, right? So,
and I'm pretty sure in that conversation I said to you, if any other marketing consultant is telling you they know what this is going to look like, it's because they've already decided what it's going to look like, and that is what you're going to get. But that may or may not serve you, because if we don't know the problem right now, we can't know the answer. We have to define the problem first.
Yeah.
Which is something I'm very passionate about. And I would actually add on to that, Lindsay, from a cookie cutter perspective. Again, this is something that both sides could test for, kind of similar to what Tim was saying, or I mean, all of these things are kind of interconnected with each other. But if you're like, I just want somebody to come in and do this for me. I had this experience with a partner program. The company's hiring for, want this partner program to work. And they're like, but this is how it's going to work. And I looked at it and I'm like, that is not how it's going to, that won't work. There's nothing about that that will work. And they were very convinced that that is what they were going to do. And I'm like, that's fine. That is not what I would do. And so I'm not going to go and do that, because waste of time. But if from either side, from the business side or from the service provider side, something is too cookie cutter, and you don't feel like you are cookie cutter, then don't accept that. And again, Keith, one of the things you mentioned is you want someone to come in and fit a very cookie cutter thing, then that might be a good thing from an alignment perspective. It might not be a red flag, but also one of the things I'm very passionate about, especially again, I think a lot of times people think technology or a marketing stack will come in and fix the thing for you. Your CRM isn't the problem, folks. Like, it's not the technology stack with your CRM, not the problem, something else. So you don't necessarily want, like, just because you've already decided you want to switch to HubSpot and now you're going to go look for someone who has experience in HubSpot. That's great. I'm sure their experience is great. But if you don't understand actually what the problem is with your current system, why you want to switch, and why you want it to be HubSpot, then somebody who's an expert in the end decision is probably not, it can't help you with the rest of the process. So something to watch out for.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I feel like I'll go back to my saying, which maybe is becoming a little bit of my mantra, which is, technology will amplify a bad problem or a good problem or a good thing. It's an amplifier. It is not the end all be all. It just makes things scale differently. And so if you have a bad foundation, it will scale that bad foundation. To your point, and using the HubSpot example, if I think that's where you start to delineate between, do I need a fractional, advisor, consultant, or do I need an employee? Do I need a contractor? Like, I think that if you have something that's really very prescriptive and simply requires execution, I don't think a fractional consultant is the right tool for the job. I feel like you just need a consultant that is very specialized in HubSpot. So I think you just need a different way to approach that problem, and not all, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, I think is the saying. I can't remember how that rest of it goes, but yeah, I think.
I don't know if anyone else tried to like hammer.
Please save me from myself.
But it doesn't work very well.
I think we need to talk about the value conversation. Sorry, Tim, did you want to add into the hammer and the nail?
I was just going to talk about the cookie cutter thing just a little bit, right? And it's technology falls into that a little bit, but we can think about if you're doing something physical work, you want to get a product to go fix the problem. I want to download an app to go fix the problem, right? The problem isn't cookie cutter. So why do you think the solution is? And so that's where we're having that conversation, understand what's going on.
Uh-oh. Oh, I guess he's officially frozen.
That was an alarming freeze.
It is alarming. Okay, well, maybe we'll jump into, apparently the universe is telling us we're done talking about cookie cutter.
Can we jump into this?
We don't want the algorithms to think we're just focused on cookie cutters. It's actually the opposite. Yeah, sure. Let's Tracy, if you want to throw up, I don't know, one of the comments. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we got some fun questions to play with. Let's settle this once and for all. Is hiring a fractional pro like speed dating, matchmaking, or a reality show where you just hope they don't get voted off the island? Well, I would say if you're treating hiring your fractionals like Survivor, then maybe you haven't aligned on going on the journey together.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be my answer to that question.
Yeah.
We also have this fun question. And I'm an Avengers fan, so I like this one. If fractional resources were like assembling the Avengers, what's the one superpower you'd say every business absolutely must look for? I feel like the answer to that one is it depends.
No, Captain Curiosity. Captain Curiosity.
Okay, actually, I love that you said that, because when we were talking about like the red flags, one of the things that was coming up for me is like not enough questions, right? If someone's not asking enough questions, again, from either side, I feel like we can't actually learn and explore and discover. Like if I'm coming in to do a problem discovery and you don't want me to ask questions, I'm not going to be very effective at discovering the problem. And also equally, if you're not asking me questions about like how I got to that conclusion or those types of things, then we don't have that back and forth. But yeah, I vote for Captain Curiosity.
Okay.
So I thought, when I read the title of this episode, immediately I went to values, not the value that you bring in the engagement, but personal, professional, company values. I did a lot of experimenting in a way of working with organizations that weren't completely value aligned. And I really, it never worked out. So and it doesn't mean all of them, but I mean, I have a good example in the way of, for me, people are at the core of everything I do. And so if I am starting to work with an organization, I will often speak about, have a conversation about the values of the company. And let's assume that this company lives by their values. Because, if they're aspirational and their words on the wall and they don't live by it, then whatever, that's another conversation. However, if they are something that's fully integrated, and like for me, if people aren't part of the values of the company in some way, it doesn't need to be people, it can be teams, it can be collaboration, it can be mindset, it could be just not just speaking about innovation and challenging perspectives and disruption and all those things. Like for me, that is the most the biggest complexity of organizations are in your people. At least that's what I find. It's the only thing that is really unpredictable. I mean, outside of like power outages and, like freezing things, like tech can be somewhat unpredictable. But I mean, even that being said, the three of us could have completely handled that situation differently than how Tim has, right? So yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to throw out the value conversation and see what you guys think about that, how important that is for you as far as working with an organization.
I also just I want to throw in the difference between published values and lived values.
Yes.
It's another reason why I have such an in-depth discovery process, because if you talk, I don't know, I can't remember if I shared this on the show before, this idea of top grading. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it was developed for interviews to interview employees, and it includes 4-hour-long interviews. The idea of which is you can't fake it for that long. And so if I want to get through what might be professional appearances at the beginning, then I have to expose myself to you multiple times in multiple different conversations. And so if you're consistent in multiple different conversations, focus on different things, different time lengths, different times of days, and these types of things, then the likelihood that you're being real with me goes up. Is it perfect? No. There's some people who are very good at faking it. But I think there's also that, it's not quite as simple as just saying, oh, hey, I've been talking to this company. These are their published values on their website. So I agree with those, so this will make sense. I would also share that from a hiring perspective. If you're applying for a job, see what you can do to interview the actual culture out of the organization, so that you can do exactly what Lindsay is talking about and actually align on your values.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't realize that before, but encourage individuals as they are applying for roles. And then I wouldn't say it should be a deal breaker, because whether they're lived, or what did you say? They're lived, or what was the other word you used, Tracy, for values that are just there?
Published.
Published. Yeah. So, but in the interview, ask questions. And so as a result of when we talk about interview, having that conversation and that two-sided dialogue where you were kind of testing for that back, but
then this is also something important to understand about your individual preferences and why we say so often it depends, because this is what I know will make my services the most productive. And so if I can't get that, then I'm not going to be the most productive. And I don't like to choose contracts where I don't feel like I'll be the most productive. I think that reflects poorly on my reputation, and that's just a terrible plan. And so, but this is for me, this is for Tracy. It's not necessarily the right thing for you, but it's in figuring out what is that from the fractionals perspective? What stands are you going to take for your clients? What kind of engagements do you know are going to allow you to be most productive? And how do you pull that out of people in a conversation? And if you know, like, I'll give you an example. I care 0%, maybe less than 0, because we're having fun with numbers today, about the color of the button on your website. I've had so many people get into these like really deep discussions about whether this button should be blue or green. And at the end of the day, I don't care. I'm the marketing resource, and I don't care what color your button is on the website. I care more about where's the button on your website. Do you have to scroll? Is it easy to find? Can people tell it's a button, right? Like, okay, there's things I care about because I'm trying to get them to press the button. The color of your button doesn't get them to press the button. So like, make it your brand colors. That's great. Let's try it. Let's see if it changes when we change the color, but it doesn't really matter. And so like, in those types of things, I find it very easy to just be like, yeah, sure, you choose the color, right? Go to town. Doesn't matter. But like, there are other things. Like, I've been having a conversation with one of my clients about NPS surveys, and like, there's a stand I'm going to take here. Okay? If we're going to do this, we're going to do it in a meaningful way. We're not just going to be another company that sends out a one question, would you recommend us? Nope, that's what everybody does. I'm not here to do what everybody does. Let's talk about why we want to do that, and then we can go and do it. But again, like, that's very specific to like how I've decided I show up in my engagements, and then I stand for that. And so I would say in our 60-60 split, that's part of the fractional's responsibility, right? In your 60%, you have to know what stands you're going to take. And when you're going to be like, yeah, pick a color of a button. I don't care. Because it doesn't matter. But like, that's fine.
I wish that
Sorry,
Vera was
I
here,
went
'cause
on a rat.
I was thinking about values, and I would ask a question from our HR expert, but maybe we can talk about it a bit, because I think
Well, maybe Vera will watch the show and then can provide her feedback in the chat after.
Comments after, absolutely. Yeah. But I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to help shape the values of a company. And so we talked a little bit a minute ago about published versus actual values. And part of the problem might be the leader saying, we're not living the values that I want to live. And how can you help with that? Right. So I think that's probably part of the conversation too, is to go, what are your values? How do you feel you're living them? How do you feel that you're aligning to them? And is that something that we have responsibility to help with? So I don't know if you guys have
and
any
there's
thoughts on
actually fractional resources specifically for that, right? Like, there are people I know who are fractional resources that focus only on values. And this is, again, like the complexity with fractional, but also the opportunity in fractional is that I don't actually need you to come in and do everything for my business. I just need you to come in and help us with this values activity. And you can find a person. If anybody out there is looking for a person, please reach out to me. I have great recommendation for you from a values perspective. But also, again, like, from a marketing perspective, from a sales, or even, I mean, like, for all of us, right? Like, we care about the business values. I make marketing decisions based on the business values. I don't make marketing recommendations based on Apple's business values unless it's for Apple. Right? I'm not going to make recommendations based on their values for you. I'm going to make recommendations based on your values for you. And so if you aren't living those values, then like, also, like, I'm the marketing resource. I don't need to be the one who helps you do the values exercise, right? I'm bring in a person to do that part of it. And then I can take the results of that part of it and do what I can do. This is the power of fractional, but then it also is an opportunity to interweave the solutions that you need together.
So I have one kind of final question. I know we're starting to run short on time here, but I want to open up a small can of worms in our final 5 minutes. Going back to the idea of how to actually select and choose the right person. How much of that selection process do you believe should be routed in like the CEO or the founder or the leaders individual decision, and how much should they socialize that fractional team member across the entire ELT or the rest of the organization prior to bringing one of them on board? Do you have any opinions or thoughts on that?
It depends.
Oh my goodness. So,
Oh, shocking. I mean, like, one of the things that comes up for me is if you're still in a business scenario where the CEO is mostly making the decisions, like even if you have a, I'm going to call it a quote unquote leadership team. I've been in leadership teams where we all know the CEO is calling the shots. Right. So like, it just like, again, this is about being honest about how your business functions. If the CEO is calling the shots, the CEO should make the decision on the fractional people. I think it's beneficial. I mean, whether you're looking at it from like a culture fit perspective or I like to talk about culture add, because as Tim, you said earlier, we want this person to come in and do something that's not currently happening in the organization. Mm-hmm. We don't want just another person to come in and do more of the same. Getting into conversations, or at least exposing that person to different members of the team that they're going to have to work with, I think is really important. Can these people collaborate together? They're going to have to collaborate together. So can we collaborate together? Will both teams enjoy that? And again, like a lot of times this is a journey, right? So this isn't about like, can I come to a specific solution on a specific thing? No, it's more about testing. Can we go on this journey together? But again, like, I think it's important to look at from a very honest business perspective, like, how do we make decisions as a business? This is part of your culture. This is part, I love Deborah's comment here too, but she threw in the budgets, right? Business goals and budgets, right? If CEOs making final calls on all of the budgets still, then like at the end of the day, it's going to be the CEO's decision. But then also, like, CEO, what do you need this person to do? Who do they need to interact with?
I think one thing that I just
stuff done, not one person.
Yeah, I want to throw, like, you can't have everyone in the organization part of every decision, but they need to be aligned on where they're going. Like big picture, core purpose, BHAG, mission. And then ultimately, like, breaking it down into annual goals. Where do we want to go this year? And this is why. So when you have alignment with an executive leader team and an organization on that, if there is like a CEO who is dealing with, operational leakage, they have a lot of upset clients, they don't have visibility to how they're doing on projects until, they send the final invoice. And that is part of what they need to do in order to achieve a goal that they are already aligned as a team. Then I would say that person should be empowered to go have those conversations and at least, bring it back to the team, depending on like how they make big decisions. But you can't not do something because you're waiting for everyone else to be okay with it, I guess. That is ultimately as long as you're aligned on where you're going, like the hows need to be broken down into different accountabilities. So, I mean, there's lots of gray to that, I would say. I don't know. Sorry, I just threw that in at the end, but it was just kind of based on what you said, Tracy. And that's what I think.
Yeah. And one of the things that, just because Deborah is in the comments talking about like collaborators, right? And I do think from a fractional perspective that like we have to enable collaboration in the organization, right? When you're bringing in someone fractional, they still need to operate as part of the team. And so I think that, again, like this is an interesting thing to pull away is like, if I'm going to bring a fractional into this role or this problem, how do they need to enable collaboration? Because if one of my problems is that we've not been able to enable collaboration, maybe I need to look for a different type of fractional resource that maybe has a specific skill of enabling collaboration and less specific industry experience.
Yeah, you need someone to lead the team, but then to echo the collaboration, if there is anyone else that are going to be part of collaborating with this individual, then they definitely need to be involved in the decision-making process. But definitely you need someone to own that accountability.
I think the question that Keith asked is for our fractional friends that are listening. Ask the person that question. How are you going to make that decision to figure out if you're aligned with their decision-making process? And it's going to depend on the structure of the organization. But I think that's a key thing to take as an indication of alignment. How are you making this decision on bringing me on board?
I love the finale with the sales qualification there.
I think I want to call it what you just said about the indicators of alignment. Like, I think this is like the most powerful thing that people can take away from this episode is for each of us, whether we're the decision maker or we're the fractional, what are the indicators of alignment that you're looking for? And if you can get really good clarity on what your indicators of alignment are, whether it's values, whether it's business problems, whether it's industry experience, what those things are, then you can look for alignment. If you don't have clarity on what those indicators are, you're going to be crossing your fingers. And I don't think any of us recommend that as a strategy. Oh, good stuff as always, folks. We will be back same time, same place next week, talking about something else related to fractional things. We haven't quite decided what that is yet, but that's what keeps you on your seats, at the edge of your seat. Come back and get back into the conversation. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful people who participated in the chat today. Deborah, I Care. Who else did we have? We had more people up there. Osana and Chris, thank you for getting into the conversation with us today.